Hi, my name is Ken Pooch Van Druten. I'm the front house engineer for Linkin Park, and I'm here with Ethan Mates.
Hello.
Ethan Mates is the recording engineer for Linkin Park, and we're at Ethan Mates' studio here in Los Angeles, and we're talking about the eMo D5 plugin. Recently, I just did a video about the eMo D5 at my home studio and talking about how I use the eMo D5 in live situations. Luckily, today we get to talk about how we use the eMo D5 in the studio situation. What's great about our relationship between Ethan and I is that we kind of work together as a team for the audio department for Linkin Park. Ethan does all the records. He does all of the live releases of stuff that have been recorded. But we have a lot of communication between each other, and we use a lot of the same plugins. Maybe before we start getting into the meat of the eMo D5, let's talk about what the eMo D5 is.
Yeah, good idea.
And there's basically 5 different functions of this eMo D5. Obviously, there's the gate section, there's the leveler section, there's the de-esser section, the limiting section, and the compression section. So those are really 5 different functions, all within the same plugin that, previously there's some other plugins that maybe have 1 or 2 of those kind of things together. But you'd have to use, a plugin chain of 3 or 4 different plugins to get to what you have in front of you right now, with those 5 things. And so what's great about this plugin is that all 5 things are available to you in any sort of combination and the visual feedback of that.
Right.
So that's the eMo D5. Let's now talk about how you're using it.
Right now, I think I have 9 or 10 instances going just in this one mix session. Yeah. I'm using it on kicks, but then I'm summing the kicks together as well as, and that's compression. There's gates that are on some of the individual ones. It's on the snare. I have it on the Tom's Bus to a stereo pair. It's on that.
Cool.
I also have it on one of the pairs of guitars. Out of the 2 guys play guitar, one of the pairs I have it on. Bass, again, an aux input where the clean DI and the distorted amp are summed together, to sort of glue those together before any kind of analog thing. I have it on both the vocals, doing a little bit of limiting, de-essing.
Yep. So let's open an instance of whatever, like the kick drum, for instance.
Sure.
Let's start there. Hey, why not?
Well, I'm using 2 eMo D5s for the kick. I have 2 separate tracks. I have that sample kick, and then I have your kick. Then I have those blended together into an aux input, and then there's an eMo D5 across that too. Oh, so the one that I'm using on your kick drum, I'm using as primarily a gate, and then the one that's on the bus with the 2 blended together is just a compression to make, to glue them together a little bit before it goes into analog world, where I'll add some analog EQ and even possibly an analog compressor to add more of a flavor versus actually doing dynamics control.
Oh, cool. So you're actually using the external key on the real kick drum, right?
Right.
Keying from the triggered,
right?
Because you lock those in visually with Pro Tools,
right? So I know that there's no misfires, and I know that I'm not going to get any weird opening of the gate from bleed because it's keying off of the trigger. So
that's great. So show us an example of like what the kick drum sounds just straight from the stage or whatever.
So this would be the kick drum, just your kick
just
drum
straight
flat.
like the. Right, and you can hear snare drum and all that kind of stuff in there.
Right. Cool. So now we're going to activate the eMo D5, and remember that this is a gate, but the gate is being triggered externally by the other sample, which has no bleed, is a clean hit. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's awesome because it loses all the snare drum stuff. Right. It makes that kick drum be clean.
Exactly, and even if I set the gate to internal, so it's just a gate that's being triggered off of itself, you can hear there's a lot of misfires and little junk bleeding through. So this way,
that's great. Yeah. That's great. So, and then you actually use the sound of the trigger kick as well, and you combine the 2 kick drums, right?
So that would be this.
Yeah, awesome.
And that's both combined. And now if we look at this eMo D5, which is set just as a compressor, and that's both of them going through that together. You know, a lot of times if I'm using a mixture of a live thing and a trigger or a DI and an amp or something like that, you'll want to use a subtle, you know, often two compressors even, but certainly one just to add a little bit, nothing drastic, to kind of glue them together. And so it sound you're creating one sound as opposed to two separate things that are living in weird spaces. Yes. So it helps to just glue
things
different
together,
elements together.
Yeah.
This is the two kick drums combined, summed through the eMo D5.
That's great. So kick that out and let's see what that's doing. Oh, that's great, man. So I totally get the hype part of that, how it combines the two. Yeah, it kind of glues them both together and, you know.
Yeah, it has a little more punch.
Yep.
The low end comes up a little bit. So overall, it's just like you're getting a nice bit, the snap is a little accentuated and the whole thing is just a little glued together, but you're not getting really obvious gain reduction and any kind of sucking or anything like that.
Yeah.
On this compressor, the kick drum bus compressor, I'm using on the compressor the internal side chain, and that's kicked up to about 134 hertz so that we are not compressing any of that low end.
Got it.
So we're getting a nice snap,
so
but
the
it's
trigger
not getting rid of
it's getting the nice snap, but it's not getting rid of the meat of the kick drum.
Right, exactly.
That's great. Let's see, what else are you using it on?
I'm using it on the Snare Bus.
Okay.
So this is a collection of your snares and a couple triggers.
Cool.
And that's using what that's in.
Right.
Same deal. It's a little bit of, I'm not getting rid of the low end, but it's a lower frequency. So this way I'm, that's
the trigger
is
of the
much
actual
more subtle than
the
kick. And again, as with the kick, slow attack and a fairly.
You want the snap.
Right. You wanted the snap before the compression hits. On the kick, it's also a very fast release. On the snare, I have the release a little bit slower so that we can get a little bit of that ring and body of the snare.
Cool.
So there's a little more sustain to it, whereas the kick is really just set to be super punchy and gone. And this one, there's a little release, so you get a little bit more air and body out of the snare. This is on a guitar, a rhythm guitar, which is.
Cool. Yeah, you can see the limiting working, the compressor working. It just kind of keeps it all in check. And
sure. We can play a little bit without it.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can hear that sounds a little flat, a little muddy.
Yeah, right.
So now
this is just, putting some glue together. Putting it
And that's the only thing I'm changing. Yeah. The only thing I'm changing there is the compression and limiting. That's just from doing
there's no
EQ
even though it
sounds like there's a bunch of EQ,
yeah.
There's none. It's just from squishing that together a little bit.
That's right.
And again, a subtle glue thing. But just in terms of functional gain reduction, as gain reduction and not as a color tool, that's exactly what we're looking for.
Cool. So how about a vocal? Do you using it on a vocal?
I am, yeah.
Let's check out what you got going on there.
Absolutely. So there's that.
That's awesome.
And in this case, I'm actually digging into the eMo 5 a decent amount.
Right.
So.
What's mine? Give me back what's mine. What's mine? What's mine? Give me back what's mine.
Cool.
So you can hear, he's obviously an incredibly dynamic singer. And has all these different tonal elements to his voice.
Yeah.
And so it really takes a combination of limiting, de-essing, compression to really
rein him in.
Yeah, rein him in, and also make sure that you don't lose all of that cool grit and crazy overtones and harmonics that are going on.
Totally.
So really, that's sort of, to me, because he's so dynamic and because his voice has all those elements, really limiting end compression, and then even sometimes a coloration compression, is necessary to really.
For sure.
And then that's on top of whatever obvious automation that you're doing.
Totally.
But just to get it to a spot where it's a good overall sound, that's kind of, and to have all of this in one box where you can see all the metering and how they're reacting to each other.
You're using the 4 elements of the eMo D5 here, and the only one you're not using is the gate, obviously, so you aren't using a gate on a vocal.
Right.
But you're using the leveler, you're using the de-esser, the limiter, and the compression, and it kind of all works together to make that vocal work and glue it together. Let's hear it without all that stuff.
Sure.
Let's hear it in bypass.
What's mine? Give me back what's mine. What's mine? What's mine? Give me back what's mine.
Cool. And then real quick, let's hear that again, that same section with it in.
What's mine? Give me back what's mine. What's mine? What's mine? Give me back what's mine.
So you really could hear, what the eMo D5 was doing there. Get all the nuances of his vocal all come up because of the expansion and the compression that's all happening. Really, really great. Cool stuff.
Yeah, super useful. The de-esser sounds great. And you also, one thing that's cool is that you can select the notch there, the type of de-esser, as opposed to just completely shelving all the high stuff, which is I've never understood.
I never understood that either. But
so,
some people must want it,
yeah,
I don't know.
Waves is good. The other Waves de-essers have that too, but it's cool that they included that feature because
In case
they
you
could have
wanted to.
easily have slimmed it down and gotten rid of that feature, but that's an important one, so it's cool that they got it. And also another cool thing that with the de-esser as well as the key is the listens.
Yes.
Which as an effect, you can also just leave the listen in and kind of do the filter thing with that,
Totally. You know what we haven't done is we haven't listened to the whole thing with it all, all the stuff that you've done. Can we hear that whole kind of end section maybe?
Yeah.
With all of it in and let's hear your mix.
So today, your truth will come. You're gonna pay for what you pay for what you've done. You'll not turn, and that's inside. You're gonna give me back what's mine. Give me back what's mine. Give me back what's mine. Give me back what's mine.
Cool. Yeah, it's great, man. Really, really cool. Thanks so much for letting us come and
My pleasure.
and check out what you got going on.
Absolutely.
And check out the eMo D5. It's a really great plugin, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ken Pooch Van Druten, and
I'm Ethan Mates. Thank you.
thanks.